Hello to everybody who is here with us or who is joining us today. And today there is my new guest, very interesting one, Charlie, and he will tell about himself.
Yeah, so I've been running a site that's a big information site on international dating for a long time, for about 12 years. It's called International Love Scout, and I'm really focused to a huge extent on the research, because when I first got into this, it was kind of a happenstance when the economy crashed in 2008. I didn't really have anything to do. And so I started the website just because, well, it was something to do. And I had some other websites going. I still do have other websites, but this one it was more interesting to look at pretty girls, frankly. And, if you got to work, at least you're looking at, it's not like working in a coal mine. So, I did the site, and very quickly I got some real hard attacks from like feminists who were opposed to international dating. And so I was like, wow, if it's really slavery, blah, 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 if they're selling, all the horrible stuff that you hear sometimes, if it's really that bad, I don't want to be involved with it. So I started doing research, and I'm very much a research-based guy. I used to be a college professor. And so
Charlie, may I ask you, why did you get interested exactly in this field? Why did you go exactly to research in dating industry?
Well, really, I was in 2008, the American economy cratered. And so I was out of work. I had been messing around in the oil business, which didn't make me rich. And so I had several websites that I was building, and this was just one of them. And then I got attacked in this site by activists who were adamantly opposed to international dating, the kind of people who got the IMBRA law passed, and who constantly attack Ukrainian brides, that all Ukrainian women are gold diggers and scammers and blah, blah, blah. And the men who go, or, they say all sorts of crazy stuff. So I started doing the research, because if it was that bad, I wouldn't have been involved. I would have said, okay, I'm not making any money. Let's just close this up. It's, I don't want to be involved in something that's not positive ultimately. And so the more research I did, I found that, yes, you could find professors who said bad things about international dating, which you always say mail order bride, mail order bride, mail order bride. And because that term's easy to demonize, just because the nature of the term. So, but none of these people had ever been to Ukraine or to Russia. And as a matter of fact, one of the earliest ones to go, Professor Hughes, who actually got to go on a contract from the U.S. State Department, she was frustrated, as I believe it's Donna Hughes of the University of Rhode Island. This is like 1996, and her gigantic frustration was that every Ukrainian girl she met wanted to marry a foreigner, that she met tons of them. And it drove her nuts. In the report to Congress that she gave, it drove her crazy that that there were so many, that she couldn't believe that how many of them wanted to do that. And so, but then when you get to about 2000, you start having graduate students whose professors in women's studies or sociology or whatever tell them, hey, I want you to, why don't you study this mail order bride phenomenon? And when they do, and they interview men and women and the matchmakers and the tour guides and everybody who's involved, the people who run websites and stuff, ultimately, especially when you look at the outcome of the couples, it's positive. And I actually have never read a research study that was purely negative results. And some of these women start out absolutely white hot hating it. I mean, they start out not just a little, they don't start out like just a little bit opposed or maybe like don't really know. Some of them start out just absolutely despising it. And probably the best book for anybody out there who's like, yeah, this guy's just yak. I highly recommend this book. Let's get it in front of the camera correctly.
Show it, please. I don't see it.
Buying a Bride. Okay. It's by this woman named Marcia Zug. And she's a professor. I can't get the book to sit right. There we are. Right there. There we got it. She is a professor at the University of South Carolina Law School. And she started off, and I think I can find it here real quick. She started off absolutely hating the process because she read an article by this guy who was a big-time fashion photographer. I think it's in the book. If it's not, it's in some article she wrote. But he was a big-time fashion photographer, and he dated all these supermodels and stuff. And at some point, he got frustrated with all that, and he went to Colombia to meet a Colombian girl. And he wrote an article about all this in GQ magazine. You cannot find that edition of GQ. It's not online. That article is, if you look at all the GQ articles, that one's not online anymore because he's still famous. And he pulled something with GQ to get him to pull the article. But anyhow, it made him out to be a total asshole. And she read that article and she was like, I hate these people, these jerky men, you know, going over and taking advantage of these poor women. And so she started doing the research. It took her, she spent like 10 years doing research. And after she had began to interview people, she found that that just wasn't true, that he was a real outlier, that he was an asshole. Okay. But he would have been a jerk in New York to American women. He would have been a jerk in London to British women. It didn't matter. He was just a jerk. Okay. And at least at that time in the guy's life, it's clear. I mean, that's why he's killed the GQ article. But but you know, over time, she changed her tune. And as a matter of fact, in this book, right at the end, she says, this is the conclusion of the book by somebody who, I mean, started out, she wanted to make it illegal for American men to, you know, go meet people, you know, matchmakers like you, that to her, you should have been, you were just a pirate. You were just a horrible, almost a terrorist or something. Okay. But she finished up by saying, most Americans perceive mail order marriages as problematic. They're uncomfortable with the fact that mail order brides often motivated by reasons other than love, blah, blah, blah. However, today's mail order brides and grooms are not a throwback to an earlier enlightened time. Instead, like most of us, they are simply men and women who believe that marriage will improve their lives and we should support their choices. So after 10 years of research, and the book, by the way, is published by NYU Press, which is New York University Press. And it's, you know, and the way an academic press works is that other professors had to read the book and give her notes. And so, I mean, it's about as thorough and authentic, you know, of a source of information as you could possibly have. And I recommend it to anybody who has serious doubts about.
Charlie, can you tell me your personal experience after so many years in this industry and so doing so many research? What is your opinion about dating online?
Well, I think, you know, online dating is
it effective or not?
Well, I mean, online dating is tricky because there's a million websites, and because, you know, it's until you're, I mean, if you're looking at video, it's a lot easier. But the bad part is that you can get an emotional connection to somebody online that doesn't translate into reality when you meet the person face to face. And this happens all the time, and I know you've experienced it with clients who thought they were in total love with somebody from letters and stuff. And then they get there and they meet them and they're like, nah, just okay.
But you remember when we met on a conference each year, there were people telling and showing us statistics and showing that more and more people met online and get married after all. So
and they do, but a lot of, I did a presentation on that probably in Odessa in 2017, and or maybe actually I did a big one in Miami in 2018, which you didn't go to Miami, but the statistics are most people hate online dating, and a lot of times what happens is that it's become so popular in the United States that you may hate it, but you got to do it. It's like cable television used to be 20 years ago. Everybody hated their cable TV provider, but
I think that like it is in Ukraine now, not many people. For example, maybe in times of my parents, it was ordinary to approach the girl on the street and start talking to her.
Yeah.
Now it's kind of strange, I would say.
Yeah.
The same as in the US.
Yeah, I think to some extent that's happened, and I think what happens with the people getting married or developing serious relationships is, you get online, you get mad about it, it doesn't go the way you want it to. You get online again and again and again, and number 62, you get lucky. You have a lot of bad experiences, and if you can just move on and ignore those, then if you keep at it, it can work. But a lot of people get frustrated before they plow through 50 or 60 or whatever the number is, clients.
But what is the main reason to be disappointed for people? Did you?
Well, everybody lies. That's the simple thing. I don't know if you want to say everybody lies, but everybody paints themselves in the most positive light. If you're a guy and you're 5'11", who knows the difference between 5'11" and 6 foot, which I don't think in Ukraine, that's not such a magic number. But in America, 6 foot is a magic number for a lot of guys. It's like 180. And so you're pretty tall. And so that's like a magic number. So guys lie about that. And you lie about your weight. And I have been 190 pounds 30 years ago, but people. So I think a lot of it is that, and then a lot of it is you're presenting your best side online. Everybody, even if you're the most honest person in the world, we all present the best side we can in these online dating forums. And so when you actually get face to face with somebody, there's a lot of room for them to be disappointed and you to be disappointed and so on and so forth. And, and then you get to the really crazy cases where people, flat out, it's just not, it has nothing to do with the person you met. And, there's catfishing and all that kind of the real crazy edge of it. But assuming two people who are both basically trying to be honest and fair and everything, they can still mislead one another without really intending to by presenting their best face. And so anyhow, I think a lot of people get disappointed. And in international dating, the language and culture, it makes it even harder. And I never, ever recommend guys to get on like one of the Cupid media sites, which are great little chat sites. They're not very expensive, but you get on there and you meet someone from Colombia or Ukraine or Thailand, and you get really excited about them. And then you get on a plane and you go to Thailand or you go to Ukraine, and then you have to do all that cultural stuff, the logistics of travel, and there's just a ton of room for disappointment and for, a big mess. And
Yeah,
I don't.
that's why to my matchmaking clients, sometimes they ask me, can I talk with the girl before I come? And recently we started to make just one Skype before the meeting, and the rest is left for the personal meeting. Because again, talking online, they can have many fantasies, they can like each other a lot, but when they meet, maybe even they can not like the perfume each other someone is using. So that's why we explain it's better to meet in reality and develop relationships in real life as soon as it's possible. And you know what I usually get from local ladies about dating sites, even about local dating sites, that first reason when they get disappointed, of course they don't go to 50 dates, even they delete their profiles after 2-3 cases like that, that most of they complain that most of local men want just sex, men who are on the sites, or there are the second reason many men are married and want sex again.
Yeah.
And the other reason they tell that on the sites there are only losers. But
Yeah.
of
I
course,
think.
different people, but they don't wait for the 50th date. They just make the conclusion and delete profiles and go to matchmaking agency, hoping for better results.
Yeah. Well, I think it's definitely, there's a lot of cultural things. I had recently a woman that I talked to who said, the whole thing, like there really are some cultural differences. Like I had this woman that I talked to a little bit. She was like, she couldn't believe that in America, if a man and a woman have a kid together, the man's going to have to pay child support, for the rest of until the child's 18. And that, she was like, she thought that was actually a science fiction story. She
Mm-hmm.
didn't believe it was possible because in Ukraine, usually that never happens. If the guy leaves, the woman's stuck with the baby. And so, but anyway, so there are a lot of real reasons for the whole thing to happen. But like I said, for American guys, it definitely opens up a whole new venue for dating, and it's an opportunity that a lot of guys don't even believe is true. Basically, they don't realize how many opportunities they have. So.
Mm-hmm. Charlie, what would be the main advice from, according to your experience, what is the best dating strategy online to get success?
Well, I mean, there's if you really want to talk about online dating versus, I mean, there's, I can go online.
How to succeed in dating online? There are still
Well,
couples who get married thanks to dating sites, and it was my case. Also, my 2 marriages we met online too. So I still believe in it. But can you just share me with your secrets of success on dating online sites and
well,
internet?
I mean, for general online dating, I think it's best to, to start out and be honest about what you're after, to not let expectations run wild right away. I always tell guys, that's better to not not to chat or write too many emails and stuff before you see one another. To me, that's real important. I mean, I think, there's certainly a lot of little tricks in terms of when you first start chatting with somebody online. I think a lot of guys make the mistake of talking too much about how pretty the girl is and stuff. A little of that goes a real long way. I mean, I have a whole list of things like that I can talk about, but that's
Mhm.
not really, I mean, there's a ton of things, but you can always go
Do you
online.
suggest some course of success in this field?
Well, I mean, it's one of those things. If you go online and you just talk, and I mean, if you just talk to some pretty girl about how pretty she is, that's not very interesting for her. I mean, she's going to be a little honored the first time you compliment her, but the 20th time, it's pretty dull. And so you have to move on and talk about other stuff. And, talk about, ask her what she does and, what she's interested in and so on and so forth. And I think
How to find out if she's genuine about this man or not, if she's
well,
serious in her search or not?
I think the terms of genuineness is if she talks about her interest in detail. If she really gets and she shows detailed interest and she explains what she's interested in, and because if some woman's just quizzing you about where do you live, how, just like all of these questions, what's your job, where do you live, on and on and on, well, that's a sign, that's maybe not the best sign in the world. If she's willing to share information with you, that's where you can do better, or I think it's a better sign. If she's sharing information, it's, and like I said, but still online, there's never, ever a certainty about, you've got to get there and meet people. But the thing is, when people get too wound up in this sort of, is this person honest? Are they not honest? Are they just a scam artist? Are they catfishing you? Whatever. Ultimately, you can get catfished in a bar face to face. Somebody can say, "Oh, I'm a millionaire," and you never know until you have spend time with people. So I think.
But we have a site. Once we had the people can come to us from embassy of the US, and they persistently asked to fill in IMBRA form, International Marriage Broker Act, and for this we have to check the person on National Sex Offender website.
Yes.
So do you people in the US who are dating inside of country, do you often use it to check your date before the date?
I don't think 99% of American women have no clue about it. Okay. There are a handful of websites that do offer safe dating stuff. But I think a lot of American women, if they really understood IMBRA, they would be like, hey, why don't we have IMBRA? Why don't we get to be covered by IMBRA?
No, maybe not IMBRA, but they can use just this website.
They could use it, but I don't think most women know about it. The vast majority have no clue about it. So, it's one of those things that, like I said, the overwhelming majority of American women don't have a clue about it. There are a handful of websites that do use it, but none of them have become super popular. And so, so anyhow, yeah, it's one of those things. But IMBRA, I think has made the process better in a lot of ways because it drove out the people who wouldn't deal with the hassle of IMBRA. So like the bad actors who wouldn't deal with IMBRA left the business, or they claim now that they're not really dating sites, they're chat sites or something. They don't want to deal with it. And I'm a little surprised the U.S. government's gone along with it because they have their ways to really get rid of people or websites if they want to. But for whatever reason, they've never felt like cracking down on those sites that are dating sites but don't call themselves dating sites. So,
nice. And Charlie, which trends do you see maybe during the last year in dating online industry?
Well, I mean, I think obviously COVID has just, I don't know. It's obviously it's killed the travel sector. So it's made it a lot tougher in terms of people coming to visit Ukraine or wherever. I've seen a lot. It does seem like, I believe that there's going to be a huge wave of serious people coming to Ukraine and coming to Colombia and stuff when COVID really ends, which I suspect is going to be in January or February 2021.
Good forecast, because I'm wondering when it happens.
Yeah, that's just my guess. But I'm just saying that when it does, because my website still gets a lot of traffic, and we have obviously some people who are really, really serious who come and read. I've got lots of articles about 1 million different topics. And they come, they read, they spend 20 minutes on my website reading articles. And so, they're pretty serious. And so I believe a lot of those guys will go ahead and take action when they can take action. But right now, they're still they don't have the option to do it. So to me,
clients coming to us, they, of course, it's not so easy like before. They go through tests in the airport, but they risk travel anyway.
Wow. Okay. Well, like I said, there has been very, very, there certainly is. I mean, I get the impression that there's a lot from looking at what I can see of the internet and from the coaching guys I deal with. I think a lot of guys are sitting at home and they're like, man, why not do this when I can do this? They're bored. There's no sports in America even right now. There's a lot of stuff you can't do right now. And so they're like, yeah, when this is over, I'm going to do this. Finally, so I believe there is going to be a lot more guys doing it at that point. And, and like I said, I think it is a good option. I mean, one of the things that Zug and these professors who've studied this, the thing they can't get to the end of, and that Zug actually had a problem with when she did her book, was that the success rate numbers, because the success rate numbers that are out there are actually very, very good, better than meeting in other situations. And however, like I said, I think there'll be more research. There is still some good research. I think you talked to Dr. Julia Mazzaro a week or two ago, and she's doing research. There's still some good research going on, and so I'm pretty positive about the industry overall.
I'm pretty positive about it too, because I think that the interest to building personal life and love and connection with the other person, it will never stop, because it's in our nature. Maybe the forms of our industry will change, but not the core need. And if there is a need, there will be always some ideas how to connect people, some forms to do it.
Exactly. And for a lot of guys, I mean, it really does, there are matchmakers in the United States, but they're super expensive. So, if you live in Manhattan and you work at Goldman Sachs and you're making $900,000 a year, you can get a matchmaker, and she's going to charge you $30,000 or $40,000, and she can set you up on dates and stuff. But if you're not in one of the major big American cities, and especially at the very high end, there's not anything like the Ukrainian matchmakers, where they do the same work that these matchmakers in the US do for $30,000 or $40,000 for a lot less. I know you don't charge nearly that much, but you do the same thing they do. And so, and a matchmaker can really, really, really help, especially if a guy is shy or a guy is, and I've met a lot of guys who were super successful at business and stuff, but they were very shy about how they presented themselves. A lot of times they had focused on their business their whole life, basically. And then,
we have of clients among my clients too, and actually I really love to work with them, because they're kind of intelligent, very, very smart, several high educations, but they are so modest, sometimes so sensitive about other people, and it's such a big advantage for relationships. Yes, they have some, maybe it's difficult for them to approach the lady, but then in development of relationships they are just perfect, because they can feel the person, and they are not like this type of guys who are macho.
Yeah.
Everywhere, and attracting many women all the time, so they are good for families.
Yeah, no, I think that's a big market. And I mean, I think that's a wonderful place for a lot of guys. Another group that I've met a few recently is guys, there's a lot of American guys who've been in the military, and you can't go on like 10 deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan and really keep a marriage together, or even, it's just difficult. And so, but these guys are retiring from the military, and they have a regular paycheck, and they don't have to do anything. They may be only 45 years old, and they spent 27 years in the Army, and they've got a nice retirement check, but it's a lot of times they haven't dated at all, or, really, because just the way that the military
style of life.
Yeah, they were married to the Army for 27 years. Yeah. And so then when they're done, they want to have a life. And a lot of times, a couple that I met were like, they really wanted to have kids. Well, if you're a 47 or 48-year-old guy in the U.S. trying to meet a woman who is young enough to have children with, you've kind of got to, you can, it happens, but it's a lot bigger struggle. Whereas if you go overseas, it's a lot easier to meet a woman who's going to still want to have kids, who's a little younger. And whereas in the States, that's just a huge challenge. And so like I said, that's another interesting market that I think is guys who can really avail themselves of international dating. So
Charlie, let's answer the questions, because some people are asking us. Okay. What would you like to see done to change the perception of international dating after COVID ends?
The big thing is, I think the couples who've succeeded need to tell people. Today, there's a lot of couples who, I have a friend, and this guy's very, very wealthy, and he has he's been married to a very, very pretty Russian lady since like 1998. Okay. And he claims, he has a whole story about how he met her, and I don't believe it. I believe that he met her probably on a tour in 96 or 97 when they had the big tour things in there. And instead of just coming out and saying that, because he's a prominent person, he has a different story. But I've talked to him enough that I'm 99% sure that story's not true. It's just the story they agreed on. And so if people would come out, I sat next to a guy on an airplane one time, and I don't often pull my business card out and say, hey, this is what I do. But I sat next to this guy, and he was a recent military retiree. And when I gave him my business card, he said, oh, those are all gold diggers. And I said, oh. And I said, well, blah, blah, blah. Well, we start talking. It turns out that in the early 90s, he was stationed in Europe. And right after the fall of the Soviet Union, him and his young Air Force buddies started going in. They would fly into Odessa and party. And he said, oh, and 4 of my squadron mates married girls from Odessa. And I was like, well, how did that work out? And he goes, oh, well, one of my buddies, their kids just got into Harvard. And I was like, dude, you've seen it. You have friends. All 4 of his buddies were still married to girls they met in Odessa in 96 or 97, whenever it was. And yet, even though he knew this, he still believed the newspaper stories. And so that media bias is huge, and it would really go away if people would just go ahead and say, hey, yeah, we met through Elena, premier Matchmaking. That was our story. if more people would do it, it would end a lot of the stigma.
Yeah. I just wanted to add that it's just stigma, and I notice the same with our clients, especially with our girls. They meet men through our agency. They build the relationships, but they tell even us not to tell my friends because that I met him in your agency. I
Well,
will
and
later.
and I believe that, and I've told this to you and the other Ukrainian matchmakers that I know, that all of y'all, the Ukrainians, y'all need to have some sort of a unified PR campaign in Ukraine, because a lot of Ukrainian girls have met sleazy foreign dudes who've come to Ukraine by themselves with a wad of money, who believe, hey, you know, I've got a bunch of money and I'm going to come to Ukraine and fool these local girls. And so there needs to be, like, the matchmakers need to do a better job of saying, man, we're matchmakers and we're going to protect you, and you're going to meet good foreign guys, not the sleazy foreign guys who are just throwing out a bunch of money and trying to impress girls because, you know, they have a bunch of cash to spend. But anyway, so, you know, I think some PR towards the Ukrainian girls, you know, it would take more than you. It would take a bunch of y'all together, but putting articles in newspapers and getting into websites that younger women read and stuff would really be effective. But anyways, let's more questions, I guess.
Just more comments. I think Solomon asks, just writes, I think COVID has been a booster to make many guys into wanting to travel since they can't do it right now.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And like I said, I think at the end of this, there's going to be a big boom in this business, because
I think it's about all people now, like in childhood when we were forbidden to do something, we wanted it most of all. and now too. So one more comment from Solomon. I agree with that. We discussed the prices, and he tells that matchmakers in the UK is just as expensive as in the US. This is what
I've met at some of the conferences. I've met a couple of very expensive London-based matchmakers who were very, very expensive.
And Charlie, we have James with us and his question. Can you read it too?
You know what? The whole thing is, if you go to my website, internationallovescout.com, and you search for academic or scholarly, I've got a slew of articles up there that have the real statistics. You can check out, you can link to the dissertations and all that stuff, but I don't have that stuff right in front of me. Like I said, I highly recommend Marcia Zug's book, who teaches at the University of South Carolina. You can buy the Kindle version. You can buy the Kindle version in 10 minutes and start reading it. But you know, I don't have the details right in front of me, which is why I'm, you know, like I said, I'll offer you those sources on my website, International Love Scout, or like I said, you can buy the Kindle edition of this book really, really fast, but I don't have all the statistics right in front of me at this time, so I'm not going to pretend that I do.
But our previous guest before you was Julia Mizares. Do you remember her from conference? And she also told about statistics, and many couples are formed, but many also from Philippines.
Yeah. The Philippines is the most popular place because they speak English, and that's a huge barrier to foreign. You know, the language barrier is a huge problem in the relationship, and also there's a real tradition there of Filipinas marrying older men, and so it's been that way, you know, at least since 1898, and so that tradition hasn't gone away.
Okay, Charlie, while we don't have more questions now, maybe you have some information to add, some valuable information for men who are thinking about meeting Ukrainian women for marriage and family.
Well, I would say the best thing to do is to, you know, read some, do your research. Like I said, there's tons of articles on my site about it. We really do try to be like a source of just information. And read. And I would urge you to read some Ukrainian history, some Ukrainian cultural stuff, Russian, Ukrainian, there's a great book called Natasha's Dance, which is about Russian culture, Ukrainian culture, super book. I don't have all the books in front of me, but there's a lot of good stuff in the last 4, 5, 6 years about Russian and Ukrainian history. And I think, wait a second, I may actually have one.
I will write down into the comments the names of books in case someone.
Well, here's a book that everybody, not only do I recommend it, this woman won the Nobel Prize. Woo. It's called Last Witnesses. And she, her name, I can't even read her name, Svetlana, there it is.
Mikhevich, Alexeyevich.
Yes. This book everybody should read because it's basically in the 1980s, she interviewed hundreds of people who were in their 40s and 50s who had been little kids during World War II. And the book is incredibly touching and has a lot about, the history and why the war is such a big deal still, because most Ukrainians they know the story. Most Americans don't really know what their granddad did in World War II. Most Ukrainians do know. And it's a different deal because it was fought in Ukraine, not 10,000 miles away. But that book will break your heart. As a matter of fact, the book's almost unreadable because it's little kids in peril all the time, except that you do realize after a little while that, wait a second, the kid has to live to tell the story. So all the little kids survive, but they see horrific stuff and, no. And like I said, books like that give you something, because I tell you what, if you've read a little Ukrainian history, you will impress the heck out of girls, and they'll be so surprised that you know anything. And the same with the language. If you're really serious about going to Ukraine,
the lady knows the history herself.
She may not know the history herself, but she'll know little bits and pieces, and she'll be blown away that you've taken the time. And the same with the language. The language, the Cyrillic alphabet and all that is a nightmare for, Americans. But if you make a little bit of effort on the language, it'll make your trip a lot simpler. And, like I said, I've spent probably 4 or 5 months in Ukraine, and you do get, it's not, after a while, you get to where you can sort of barely get by. But if you start before you go, which I didn't do the first time, it's a lot simpler. And so, read some, like I said, Russian history, Ukrainian history. There's lots of great books. And then work on the language some. And Ukrainian is hard to find language aids. There's not as many out there, but Russian is a world language, and there's tons and tons and tons of great, Russian teaching aids. There's tons of stuff on YouTube. That's all good. And so if you go over there and you've got 100-word vocabulary, and you can order in a restaurant, and you can find the restroom, and you can, find your hotel again, you'll be way, way, way ahead of the game, and you'll impress the girl some that you're serious. So that's 2 things that I would definitely do if, that I would, and I do urge guys to do that kind of stuff. So,
Yeah, I agree with you, Charlie. And it just, it makes heart melt when even just I hear a man trying to speak Russian, and it's cute.
It's cute. Yeah. Okay, good. So that's exactly the information that guys want to know. And so, you know, but yeah, that was my experience, that a little bit of Russian went a long way. Although if you go out around Lviv and you go in Western Ukraine, then you have the people who want to correct you and tell you how to say it in Ukrainian. And I'm like, dude, I'm just barely getting by in my like 3-year-old Russian, you know, I can say 100 words or something. And now you're going to try to tell me how to say it in Ukrainian. Please, please, please stop.
Yeah, when I first traveled to Lviv myself, it's the eastern part of western part of Ukraine. I was told by many people that when I come here, I will be required to speak only Ukrainian. But as soon as I don't speak Ukrainian at all, I'm coming from Russia originally, I was kind of cautious about it. So I was told about many evil people who would pressure me to speak only Ukrainian, but nothing this happened.
Yeah, I had nobody was mean to me. Lviv was great. I had an awesome time in Lviv, but it's a beautiful city. And but I did have some store clerks and stuff who said, you know, in Ukrainian you say it this way, and I'm like, barely manage.
But Ukrainian is considered one of the most melodical languages in the world.
Yeah, and supposedly it's actually easier to learn, but you know, they say it has less. Yeah, I don't remember, but anyhow, it's supposed to be easier, but like I said, there's more aids, and that's what I just started telling people. I was like, Ukrainian isn't a world language, so in America it's hard to find tools. That's your excuse. There's a piece of advice right there. Because just if you go to Lviv or you go, what's the other city? Frankie, way out in Western Ukraine. Franciske, it's named after a poet or something. Oh, well, it doesn't matter.
Ivano-Frankovsk, we have Ivano-Frankovsk.
Yes. No? I went, that was the end of the line for my trip. And I mean, the other thing about Ukraine, you should find somebody to talk about the train system. Because the train system makes traveling around Ukraine very, very, very simple. And compared to America, where you just have to have a car. If you take the inner city train, isn't that what they call it? The fast train?
Intercity.
If you take the inner city, it's way, way simpler to. The first time I came to Ukraine, I flew from Odessa to Kharkov. I'd never do that again. I would just take the inner city, which would take me an hour longer or something, but I would get into the train station in Kharkov. I wouldn't, you know, nobody should ever fly inside Ukraine. Ukraine's it's a big country. It's about the size of Texas for people who don't know, but the trains are fast and comfortable. Those trains are. Now, if you want a real Ukrainian experience, you can take the slow train, and on the slow train, you'll ride with all the babushkas and the little babies and everything.
I think that they will remember forever when people are eating inside of cabin.
Oh yeah, well,
on
the slow train, I took the slow train one time from Kharkov to Dnipro, and I paid $4.36. But in America, you can't take a cab 2 miles. You can't take a cab 1 mile for $4.36. You can't get in a cab probably in most American cities for less than $5. But I went like 300 miles surrounded by a bunch of babies and old ladies. And it stops in every little village, and it took forever, but it was, I mean, it was what it was. It was an experience. I wouldn't
think it like just adventure. It can be funny. Yeah,
it was an adventure. I didn't take the slow train again, but it was an adventure, and the countryside's beautiful, and it was fine.
Yeah,
and,
you can see the atmosphere, how it happens in Ukraine. Yeah, how people travel, how they live.
Yeah, but I had a great experience after I started riding the train. I rode the train all over the country from Dnipro all the way to wherever I said Ivano-Frankivsk, the end of the line. Well, it wasn't the end of the line, but it was as far as I went. But I rode it all over the place. So, but yeah, the train system is great, and you know, and the restaurants in Ukraine, if you've just for in terms of traveling, one of the things that doesn't get enough press, and I lived in New Orleans and I lived in Los Angeles, and I've had I've eaten at a lot of great restaurants, and the restaurants in Ukraine, especially in Kiev, but also in Odessa, are absolutely world class. And you can eat in super nice. I mean, I lived in New Orleans for years and years, and New Orleans had like 4 or 5, you know, really world class restaurants then. And I went to them like twice in 10 years because, you know, who has $200 to go to Commander's? Okay, I didn't. But when I was in Kiev, I could go to a super nice restaurants for 15 or 20 bucks. If I didn't buy wine, probably towards 15. And so, you
Yeah,
know,
it's very delicious food here. When I even coming from Russia, I felt the comparison. And in
yeah,
Odessa, they cook very, very delicious food. And at homes, just women, they can cook very delicious food. And the restaurants are perfect.
yeah, the restaurants, Ukraine has a world-class restaurant. You know, restaurants are driven by competition. And so clearly in Ukraine, there's a lot of competition, and their game is very high. I mean, most good Ukrainian restaurants, they're every bit as good as what you would have in Los Angeles or New York or New Orleans or whatever, real top restaurants. So that's another thing that doesn't get enough press about coming to Ukraine.
Charlie, we have one more question from James. In order to have better chance to get driver's license in DMV, what is DMV? Do you know?
The driver's the motor vehicle bureau. He's basically offering us a little joke, but you know, it's cool. You're right, and I know some of my points are pretty straightforward, and I'm happy you realize that, but not everybody does. You'd be amazed. I have an email account, and you can email me sometime. It's on my website, and I get all sorts of very, very, very surprising questions. But anyway, so you know, it's one of those things.
So Charlie, it seems we have to finish already. We don't have more questions. And if you have to add something, you can do it now, or we finish.
No. I think we've covered a lot of ground. Like I said, it's, you know, it is a great opportunity for a lot of guys. And if you're prepared when you go, you will do better. Like James said, yeah, if you've studied for the driver's test before you go to try to drive, you will have a better chance of passing the test. And so I highly encourage, but you'd be amazed at the guys who just say, oh, I'm just going to go to Ukraine and I'm going to meet, you know, a super hot 19-year-old, even though I'm 62 and, you know, haven't worked out since Vietnam. But anyways, so, you know, so yeah, you should do your homework, get prepared, and make it, you know, if you really set out like that, you have a much better chance of success. So, all right.
Preparation, like before any important event, we always do preparation in some way. Yeah.
The more preparation you have, the better off you are. And so, you know, that's all that you know, that's basically my advice.
So thank you, Charlie, a lot, very much for coming today, for accepting my offer and being so kind to join us today to share your experience, your expertise.
I've enjoyed it, and I wish nothing but the best for everybody who goes. You know, it really is an opportunity, and if you have the right attitude about it, at the very least, you'll have a hell of a good time. You know, it'll be an adventure, and it can be a lot of fun. And like I said, my experiences in Ukraine have been really, really good. So at any rate, that's about it.
Yeah, I wrote your website. I wrote down in comments the books you recommended. So I hope our guests will take as much as they can, useful information from what you gave us today, and use it.
Okay, well, that sounds great. And we will, I will talk to you later. Okay. Thank you a lot, Alexander.
Yeah. Thank you, dear guests, for talking to us, for asking your questions. And I hope you liked. You will take useful pieces of advice for your life, for your trip to Ukraine, and for finding Ukrainian girl for marriage and relationships. So have a nice evening, everyone. Thank you, Charlie, again. And we finish. Mm-hmm.